Okay, so the seventh and final review question was looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you have learned in the progression from it to the full product? Now, the first thing to talk about was, I'd say, the fact that we did a heck of a lot more research into the specific crime-related genre. For example, we looked at several different films in the crime genre, and we reviewed this, and we looked at specific conventions that they've used. For example, the use of props, the use of low-key lighting was very prominent and very reoccurring feature in crime films. So that was one way that we implemented this into our main task. And the difference between this was we went into our preliminary task without having done any research. So we had an idea, we filmed the idea, and then we edited it, and that was it. We didn't have any specific sort of idea of, right, these characters need to be like this. The best way to portray them to the audience is by doing this, by showing them this way, by dressing them like this, even though we did do that, it wasn't done on purpose. We didn't do any research towards that. It just kind of happened. But with our main task, the final production, there was definitely that sense that we put a lot more effort into trying to achieve the conventions of a normal crime film, and I feel that was evidence. And another part was all the target audience research that we did. We originally sent out some test footage, which there is a video of further down on my blog, and this basically allowed us to show the audience some test footage of what we planned our final product to look like. And obviously we got some good feedback on this, and it helped us a lot to portray exactly what we intended to do and see if there were any improvements that they felt that could be made. For example, one piece of feedback suggested that we added a bit of extra lighting. However, they didn't want it to be artificial lighting. They suggested we use more candles because it would make the shot quite clearer. It would reduce a tiny bit of noise that we had in the shot in our test footage. So definitely the fact that we did some test footage, presented that to target audience, and then got feedback on it was definitely a step forward in the progression from our preliminary task to our main task, because that's something we didn't do in the preliminary. The second thing to talk about was the fact that even though we did do a storyboard for the preliminary task, I felt during the preliminary task we felt very confined to sticking to this storyboard. Even though we did quite have a lot of detail on it, I felt the main task was detailed a lot more. But I think the main point of this was how comfortable we were to improvise on the storyboard. When you watch through the preliminary task, you'll notice that some of the shots seem quite not awkward but out of place. And obviously, when we were planning the video, we wasn't in the place and we hadn't actually filmed in there before. So we were sort of just assuming that these shots would work. And we felt that because they're on the storyboard, we had to do them. But instead, with our main task, we were more sort of confident and had the ability to say, right, this shot's on the storyboard, but we filmed it, we've come here, we put the camera up, we set it up, we watched through what we filmed, and it just doesn't look right. So we ended up not using those shots and refilming them and adding something else, which definitely helped the flow and effectiveness of the film itself, which I think is definitely noticeable when you watch the video. So just our confidence in ourselves to make different decisions to what we had planned, even though we should stick to what we planned. If they don't work out, then we should change it, and I think we did that very well. I'd say again, after watching our preliminary, there was a range of shots used, but they all seemed too similar. I mean, there was examples of pull focus, things like that. But the shots, they just seemed too similar, and there was no defining of. That sounds strange, but there's no defining between each shot. So, for example, they'd be from different angles, but there would be nothing different about them. They'd all be very similar. So this is something we wanted to take into account when filming our main product, which I think is also quite evident when you watch the film, because even though the shots are similar, they're not all clumped together, so it doesn't seem to drag on as much, because there's that more diverse range within a certain space of time. So I think we did develop the use of shots from the preliminary to the main task, which was definitely progression. Let's just show you some of those examples of those shots now. So here's just a quick clip from our preliminary task, and as we go through the different shots, you'll notice that they are different shots, they're from different angles, but they all seem very similar. There's nothing particularly exciting and anything that stands out about any of them, apart from the pull focus shot that we have at the end. So when you're watching these, they just seem almost not dull, but just a little bit plain and boring. You do get different close-ups and different views of the action, but I felt that quite a lot of these shots just drag on too much, and the pace of editing isn't quick enough for the type of effect that we were going for. The shots seem to last too long, so there's the pull focus that I was talking about. That is just an example that we did use different effects and different camera techniques. However, I don't feel they're effective as they were in the main production. I felt that we definitely implemented them better in the main production, because it just seems to flow a lot better, and the pace is just seems to work a lot better. So here in comparison is a clip from our final product, and as you can probably see already, we use a lot more moving shots. So we have a tracking shot here. There's a zoom in the very first shot that we've seen. And this just creates a more immersive experience, and it seems a lot more interesting to the audience. And as you can see, in the previous clip, we spent a lot of time filming just one aspect, so of literally just him putting on his shirt. But here in this scene, we have, in our final production, we have a range of different activities that he's doing. So it's more interesting for the audience, because they're not just constantly watching one thing. We try to capture the same action from different angles, like here now, but we felt that it didn't drag on too much, otherwise we wouldn't have used these shots. If we thought they started to become boring, then we wouldn't have used them. So I felt this section was a good example of how we go from the different types of shots. We go from a low angle shot on the floor to a POV of him running, and then again we go to another point of view shot just like that, and then we do another example of a pull focus shot as you've seen in our preliminary task. But as you can see, they're all scripted together in a different way to our preliminary. They're all much more interesting, and they all have a different feel to them, whereas the preliminary task, they all just felt similar, too similar. Whereas the way we've constructed this and put it together, it flows much better and seems much more natural, giving obviously the audience a more pleasurable experience while watching.